We take a single episode of a science fiction TV series and overanalyze it to within an inch of its life. This is the Fusion Patrol Podcast. Welcome to the discussion. Hello and welcome to another episode of Fusion Patrol. I'm Eugene.
And I'm Simon.
And tonight we are going to be looking at The Prisoner and the episode Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling. We'll start with a summary. Sir Charles and the bright boys at British Spy Central are trying to decipher a code left behind in a series of photographs, but they are unable to do so. They must find the brilliant scientist, Dr. Saltzman. It's another day in the village, and Number 6 paces about his room like a caged animal, while Number 2 and a visitor to the village, called the Colonel, watch him on surveillance. The Colonel has been sent by the highest authority for an important mission. Number 2 explains that Dr. Saltzman developed a technique for transferring the mind of one man into the body of another. With this technique, spying is moved to a whole different level. They must find Dr. Saltzman so that the technique can be theirs. They have a working version of Saltzman's machine, and they transfer Number 6's mind into the Colonel's body. They also erase all his memories of the time he spent in the village, and release Number 6 in the Colonel's body back to his home. Number 6 awakes in his bed. It's a bright, beautiful day, and he'll be attending his fiancé's birthday party. Then, he looks in the mirror and sees a stranger staring back. He remembers the village and the thought transference process and realizes it must be the Saltzman process. His fiancée arrives at the door, having seen his car outside, wondering where he is. Number 6 at first tries to tell her, but realizes it's been a year, and she will not believe such a fantastic story. Fortunately, it is exactly 1 year to the day since he's been abducted, and she's having another birthday party today. He says he may have a message from him at the party. He goes to confront Sir Charles, who doesn't believe he is the agent formerly known as ZM-73. Or does he? He's intrigued enough to put a 24-hour watch on Number 6. At the birthday party, Number 6 doesn't try to convince her with his words. He just asks for the mysterious piece of paper he left with her the night before her birthday 1 year ago. Quote, in case something happened. She retrieves it for him, and then he delivers his message. He kisses her in such a way that she realizes it must be him. He retrieves the photos and learns that they've already been picked up once. Back home, he decodes them and learns of Saltzman's location, a small town in Austria. He travels overseas and finds Saltzman working as a barber. He convinces him, with the use of his handwriting, that he is his old friend, and they await the arrival of people who are undoubtedly following him. One of the sides must have his captive body, but which? The British arrive first, but as Number 6 and the agent fight, the village retrieval team gas them both, and Number 6, still in the Colonel's body, and Saltzman are taken to the village. Saltzman reveals that he has perfected the reversal process, but will only perform it on his own conditions. Number 2 agrees, but watches and records everything via camera. Saltzman uses himself as a medium to facilitate the process, and collapses at the key moment. The Colonel leaves the village. Number 6 has been restored to his body, and Saltzman dies. But as he does, he speaks to Number 2 about his orders from Number 1. The Colonel's mind is in Saltzman's body. Saltzman has escaped. Number 6 is still a prisoner. So, this is the point in the show where typically I ask the co-host and say, what did you think of this story? But I want to take a step out of protocol just this once and say that had you handed me, before we started this prisoner series of podcasts, had you handed me a list of the prisoner episodes and said, rank them in the order that you like them, I probably would have put this episode towards the top because I like the whole science fiction mind transference, get out of the village kind of story. But having watched it again with a critical eye, this is a real stinker. It's not as bad as Dance of the Dead, but this is a real stinker. I just wanted to say that in case anyone thinks that at some point during the course of this podcast, my opinion has been changed by what may be discussed. I want people to know where I'm starting from right now. So what did you think of this episode, Simon?
I didn't think that Dance of the Dead was a real stinker. I didn't think it was a great episode or that it stood out, partly because when McGowan's on screen, there's something quite mesmerizing about his performance. It's always interesting and it's always entertaining. And The Prisoner is very well put together. And so all of these things kind of conspire to mean that actually, I think, really, what is it, 9 episodes I've watched now. It really is incredibly consistent. I mean, there are good episodes and there are great episodes, but there haven't been any really terrible episodes. And I did at the start of this think this isn't really working for me. And clearly one of the reasons is that it is McGoohan light, which in itself, well, in another series wouldn't necessarily be a problem. I mean,
right.
The Doctor Light episodes of Doctor Who are among my favourite episodes. The Avengers has a number of episodes where one or other of the, I mean, obviously they share the lead there, but one or other of the stars takes a break for a week. But in this show, where it is so McGoohan, I mean, it's not just McGoohan centric, but he's obviously this creative force at the heart of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a real surprise to me that they even tried to do an episode without him. And I suppose the fact that he's so involved in it makes it all the more important that he gets time off from, having to because clearly, pretty much every scene the prisoner's in, he gets time off to recharge his batteries or whatever. But,
or in this case, he was filming Ice Station Zebra in America, right?
Okay, so it was.
Or is that called Ice Station Zebra in Britain, or is it called Ice Station Zebra? It
would be called Ice Station Zebra, but it's probably spelt the same.
Yeah, that was where he was. So that is why he is missing from this episode.
Oh, right, busy man then. But I mean, there were other things that were weak about the opening. First of all, it was a different opening, or at least the version I watched, the iTunes version.
Yep,
had a pre-title sequence.
Yes, that's
and then you had that too.
Yeah, that's unique.
You go into the titles as usual, and then the normal what do you want? I want information bit wasn't there.
Right. Yeah, that's there are a couple of instances in the course of The Prisoner where the opening titles have been played around with. I think Living in Harmony is probably the best example of that we still got coming up, but they do have something different going on for various reasons. So,
but here it seems an odd choice, because you'd have thought, in a sense, what you wanted to do was to keep as much of the kind of standard furniture of the show the same, because you want that familiarity to kind of compensate for the fact that your star is not on the screen for almost all of this episode.
And they needed a lot of padding in this episode too. And they could have used the opening titles for another 30 seconds of padding that they didn't have to fill.
Sure. So, some of the stuff at the beginning I didn't think was handled that well. And sticking a load of stock footage in McGoohan, while it was clearly convenient when they didn't have him around, didn't really explain that clearly what was going on. Certainly at the beginning, I was pondering on the fact of, was this really a genuine mind swap, or had they put the Colonel in McGoohan's house, made him pretend to be McGoohan, and was sort of using that as a way to. I know that's a bit of a long, convoluted, and unlikely idea, but this is The Prisoner after all.
Yeah.
But it obviously quite quickly became apparent that couldn't be the case because of what he knew. And then you've got the voiceover.
Right. Yeah, there's all sorts of things in this episode. I think it does suffer a lot from the lack of McGoohan. And as you say, the man has an almost mesmerizing presence on screen. And I find that in anything I've ever seen Patrick McGoohan in. I mean, the only thing tolerable in the movie Braveheart is his performance as, was he Edward Longshanks in that?
And I've seen it, I've forgotten about it.
He was, suitably, villainously evil in that film. And I didn't even know it was him for a long time, because he is made up heavily and a lot older, but it was still, it was a captivating piece of work. So I think the show does benefit from that as a whole. above and beyond the writing, I think there is something about Patrick McGoohan that is missing here. The stock footage felt like they were wasting time. There were other things that were strange. I don't know if you noticed, but it was very, very obvious that when number 2 was briefing the colonel in the number 2's office, that was not the actor who played the colonel standing there. It was, I don't know who it was, but he was just standing rigid straight, not talking, and he had the wrong color hair, for starters. And so they must have had to do something around actors or locations or I don't know what, but there just seemed to be little spots. There's a spot where there's a shot of the Lotus 7 riding. There's more than one spot of where the Lotus 7 is riding through town, and it's obviously McGoohan. It's just absolutely obviously McGoohan. And then the next shot, he pulls up, and the colonel steps out wearing the same clothes. And it looks like it might be shoddy mixing of stock footage when they obviously have the Lotus 7 because there are scenes of him driving it.
But they're reusing existing footage that they've got with McGoohan because they think they can get away with it.
Yeah. Or are they trying to do that so that you'll be more convinced that he is the prisoner in the colonel's body? I don't know. But that is my convoluted crazy. Well, it is the prisoner. They might try something like that, but I just think it was bad use of stock footage in this. So
story. What did you think then of his performance as McGoohan, or as as the man with McGoohan's mind in his brain?
He was. No, it didn't work for me. It didn't come off. I mean, he tried to do the stern McGoohan face all the time, but when he would be kind of beaten, like at points where he would turn around and say, well, then there's nothing I can say to you that would convince you because you'll counter it. He seemed too emotional, even though it wasn't very emotional, but it didn't sound like something that McGoohan's character would say. So it's also in the writing, but in the expression. And of course, in the kissing scene, that totally I did not buy that at all.
I did think that was interesting because I was thinking, given what I know from previous episodes, which comes from our discussions about McGoohan not wanting to do those kinds of scenes, if McGoohan's not present, then the barrier to doing those scenes has gone. And even though it's his character, they can start doing things that he might object to if he were still playing it.
I actually feel like they were doing it intentionally because he'd object to it. Because it doesn't make any sense in the context of this story. I'm sorry, but, a little rub on the right side of the face and a kiss on the right, a kiss on the left, a kiss on the lips. I'm thinking there are more than just number 6 who can do that exact sequence of kissing. So if that's what convinces her that it's him, I didn't buy it. That was less convincing than the handwriting thing. I
liked that bit. I think that was the moment in the story when actually I changed my mind and decided I was quite enjoying it. The reason was that I liked the way in which she became convinced, and she was convinced before he kisses her.
She was somewhat convinced, yes.
She lets him kiss her because she's gone through in her own head all of the various possibilities, and she's come to the conclusion. And I liked that way of doing it, rather than him having to sort of try and do the hard sell. He's thought about it when she comes to the house originally, and he's kind of almost had a go at it, and then he's thought, no, abort, this isn't going to work. And yet, through his behaviour and through his characteristic kind of pursuit of getting on with what he needs to do, and through what he says to her, then she becomes convinced. And I like that.
Yes, I agree. She is being convinced along the way. I don't see that the performance that he's doing is good enough that, let's put it this way, if I didn't know it was The Prisoner, and I watched that performance, never in a million years would I go, he's doing a Patrick McGoohan. I would not get that.
I probably agree about that, but I thought the performance was quite good, actually.
And then also, I mean, how grounded in science fiction do you have to be before your missing fiancé, when a complete stranger shows up in your missing fiancé's house after a year, and you spend 5 minutes with him at most, without him ever even mentioning the idea that your brains can be transferred by a science fictional process, that you would go, I think that must be him in there. I have trouble buying that. I really do. Everyone else in the story has trouble buying it when he says it to them. When he explains the story. Even Saltzman has trouble believing it. And he invented the process, for crying out loud.
Yeah, but he's got to believe the science. She's just got to believe the reality. And I think one of the things about this, and one of the reasons that it's kind of done in the way it's done, and we as an audience are expected to believe what we see her reaction to be, is because it seemed, I don't know, we've mentioned this before, it seemed more plausible then, in view of what was known, than it does now. Would that be fair?
Okay, I think that's true, because there is that line about, oh yeah, I've seen the Indian guys do that in the earlier things, so maybe.
The completely ludicrous sci-fi premise is not something that is unique to this episode of The Prisoner. Much like the kind of double episodes, these things crop up in other shows like The Avengers, which did it a number of times. At least once. And I guess that just kind of reflects more of a fascination with the idea, and a kind of impression that the science could be powerful enough to kind of develop the technology to do this much, much sooner than it seems like it could possibly do now.
Mm. So how does this tie in with the title of the episode? Do not forsake me, oh my darling. It must have something to do with that moment, but
with his fiancée.
Yeah,
the fact he needs to. Well, let me come to another problem I have with this episode.
Okay.
One of the long running themes we've had in these discussions has been the whole episode order thing, because of my let's call it obsession with continuity. And the fact
are you going to bring up Many Happy Returns?
I'm not going to hark on things that have gone before, but yes, how on earth does it fit with Many Happy Returns? Whether it's before or after, this breaks continuity. And in fact, even without Many Happy Returns, Many Happy Returns makes it work. But how can we not have known about his fiancée? Suddenly, we need a fiancée for this episode, so we'll just write one in that he's never mentioned before. The fact that he is a prisoner in the village and has been they mentioned 12 months in this. Well, episode order comes into that, but it certainly feels to me at this stage like it's been more than 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
And in all that time, he has given, and I suppose we know him to be quite a sort of closed and contained individual, but he's given no indication that there is a significant other, a special person who he has been separated from by this isolation in the village. And the problem with Many Happy Returns, apart from the fact that, do we get an indication of time in Many Happy Returns? How long has it been?
No. Not really.
There are other indications of time throughout the episodes we've seen, and I haven't noted them all down, and I'm starting to wish I had. But in Many Happy Returns, he's got a fiancée, and he spends the whole episode schlepping around,
not going to say hi,
looking for the village or whatever. He doesn't even mention her. Not, is she all right?
Right.
Is she around? He doesn't go and say hi. Yeah, it's. Oh.
And his boss is her father.
Absolutely.
Who's a different boss than in. Okay, so
having different bosses, I can kind of buy that stuff. But yeah, her behaviour is somewhat odd, given that she's engaged to him and he has disappeared without saying anything to her for 12 months, and she still considers herself engaged to him. And
she drives by his house every day, apparently, to see if his car's there.
Well, indeed. And the only excuse you could possibly have would be that because she knows what line of work he's in, then maybe she could conclude that it's something to do with that, and as indeed it is, of course. But the fact that her father is his boss, and she doesn't. In this episode, we see the scene where she goes and asks him whether he's sent him on a mission. And this is the first time in 12 months it's occurred to her to go and ask that question.
Didn't she say at the start of that scene, you told me you didn't know where he was? So maybe they had the conversation at 12 months ago, and he said, I have no idea where he is. And so now that this has come up, she goes back and revisits it. And
if she's driving past his house every day, I mean, and it's her dad, I'd be having that conversation with him every week.
Yeah. Any word? Heard anything? Yeah. And the fact that she doesn't believe him is the other half. It's like, yeah, but I know what line of work you're in, and so you might not be telling me the truth. And Dad says, oh, I'm telling you the truth. Yeah, but you might not be telling me the truth. Basically. So that's wrong. So I want to bring up one thing before we plunge on to other problems with this episode. I don't think it carries it off, but I just wonder, is the do not forsake me, oh my darling, is this back to that theme of the individual, integrity of the individual? Because are we trying to show that it is not McGowan's, but number 6's inner self, his thoughts, his mind, his behavior, that is the man, and that's why she can see it, because he is still that man. He has not been changed. He is himself, and himself is not the sum of his physicality. It is the mind that inhabits the mind that inhabits the man. And that's the best I can come up with, and that the fact that she has stayed true to him, which appears to be the case, and can recognize him, is really the only thing that's important about her in this story. I mean, she's utterly, it could have been anybody, but they introduced this notion of a fiancé. I really don't get why it's in there, in the story. And as you say, it messes up continuity across the board.
Yeah, I mean, if you'd had it established already, it would be an obvious thing to do. As it is, I don't see what it adds. And in terms of that theme of his individuality and his integrity, I think you could probably say it's not inconsistent with that theme, but I don't think it brings anything new in terms of adding to that. And I have questions about his motivation in this one as well, because it's another London story. So, okay, I'm not going to be able to resist making connections again with Many Happy Returns.
How could you not?
He doesn't go looking for the village. He doesn't. In Many Happy Returns, it's his immediate obsession. Now he's in a position where he is free again. He is a free man. Okay, he doesn't have his own body, but he's still an agent and a free agency in a way that he has never been in the village. So he could go anywhere. And given that anyway he is somewhat distrustful of his former employers, but he's not necessarily at a disadvantage by the fact that they couldn't be expected to recognise him. In fact, that could be turned to a positive advantage.
He's not supposed to remember the village. They erased his memory of the village. That was the whole point of that machine that they showed the colonel first. They said, here we take these people. He told us everything we want to know. We've erased all his memory of being here the last few days and sent him on his way to gather more information. And then later, number 2 is saying that to the unconscious number 6. Sleep, forget us, my friend, and go do your thing.
Okay, I missed that altogether.
Okay, so well, it's easy to miss because it's so badly handled, because he immediately wakes up, looks in the mirror, and suddenly we have that 30, 45-second montage of him remembering the village.
Well, yes, exactly. That is inconsistent with that.
I totally...
So badly, I was thinking, how on earth could I have missed that?
I totally didn't get it until I was reading a synopsis of the episode. That somebody, I think Wikipedia, and it was saying, yeah, he's forgotten the village. And I'm like, he never forgot the village. Although, in a way, it kind of makes more sense, because otherwise he'd be hunting for the village or whatever, but it does. So
yes,
think about...
yeah. I mean, that, if that were true, it would make sense. And obviously, the Saltzman episode is supposed to be recent at the time that he is disappeared, so it would also make sense that it immediately comes to his mind. But it makes that, what I've already called a kind of fairly badly done montage sequence, just look
even worse,
totally ill-judged.
Okay,
because it distracts from the plot.
Here's where it gets even worse. Okay, so they make him forget the village. They put him in his house. He looks in the mirror. He has the montage and remembers all about Saltzman, because there's even shots of the montage of the transfer process and everything, and all that stuff is put in there. And then the doorbell rings, and the girl shows up, and he says, "Hey, I haven't seen you since last night when you were showing me your dress for your party today." So not only has he been returned on exactly 1 year to the day, but he doesn't remember any of it, despite the montage we just saw.
Yes, and I put that down to confusion, the forgetting the 12 months because he's suddenly back. But the memory thing makes a lot more sense.
So
that is a really bad montage. What a terrible decision.
And this part gets totally washed under the bridge because of how poorly structured the episode is. He gave her this piece of paper in case something happens. That kind of sounds like he was expecting something to happen to him. And then he goes off the next morning on his fiancé's birthday and storms down to the ministry or wherever it is, which is run by his soon-to-be father-in-law, in an angry huff to resign. You couldn't wait till after her birthday party to ruin the day? You know, I mean, he basically did his resignation on her birthday and was expecting trouble. So does that mean he resigned over something to do with Saltzman? Was that what was foremost on his mind at the time? It's very, very badly. Like I said, it's the repeat watchings, and I started picking this thing up. It's like, wow, this is really not well thought out.
Yeah. Well, I agree.
Of course, they play mind games with us at the beginning. When at the pre-title sequence, they're showing the slides, and Sir Charles is saying what a lousy photographer. He's a brilliant scientist, but a lousy photographer. And he goes, "There's got to be a code in it somewhere. Show me number 6." And they pull out the picture of Saltzman and put it in there. Okay, which was a psych out, kind of like they did in Many Happy Returns, where James, I think it was James, called him number 6. The only time somebody refers to him by name, and he turns around and says, "I'll deck you if you do that again." So they did that, I think, for the audience. But the sad part, later on, the Saltzman picture is in the stack of the 4 pictures that he uses to decode it, but none of those is number 6.
Good spot. Yes, of course.
So, yeah.
And in terms of numbers, the fact that he is ZX32 or whatever it is.
73, I think. ZM73.
Well,
I think. I wrote it down. I could look it up.
Has a Z in it. But, it's a number, isn't it? He is not a number, and yet
that's right.
At work he is.
But he didn't give his name. Do you want my real name or my code name? Code name. France, it's Duval. And then blah, blah, blah. Which is kind of an awkward scene. Another thing that was awkward, and we're talking about the performance of the man playing the Colonel, or the Colonel's body, when McGowan is narrating the scenes where it's a bright, lovely day today. I got to go do the car. And more particularly later on, he says, if I keep on going like that, I'll end up in jail for forgery. And, maybe I should try my handwriting. Oh, yeah, that's the same. Well, that's good. I like that part. He seems chipper and happy. His voice is very, oh, well, that's very good. But if you look at the face of the guy playing him, he is stonewall scowling the whole time. There is no continuity between the face and the voice. That's in fact, McGowan sounds amused when he's reading those lines, and That doesn't work either. That's probably McGowan's worst performance as well. So
yeah, it could be. I mean, I think even where there's kind of synchronicity between those things, it felt to me like the voiceover undermined the whole effect. I can see it's there to try and enhance it, to try and give you more of a sense that McGowan is in there somewhere, but somehow it detracts from the fact that it's so out of the style of the show. I was going to say out of character. It's out of character that his inner thoughts are being transmitted onto the screen. But of course, it's not down to his character. It's down to the way the show is styled, and to have that kind of very artificial kind of it's a television construct, isn't it? It would have worked better if they could have relied on the performance alone, and I don't know why they felt they couldn't, but I think it didn't help.
Yeah, I think it was just to make sure that we had more McGowan in the episode. Maybe he got paid they had to do a certain number of lines to meet his contract or something. So I thought it was interesting at the end of the episode when Saltzman is saying to number 2, I'll do the reversal, but only if I can do it in my own way and on my terms. I'm dictating my terms. And number 2 responds with a Nazi salute and a Sieg Heil to him.
Tasteful.
Yeah. Was there anything other than just you're a German and Germans are all Nazis, or is this close enough in time to World War II that we should be thinking that Saltzman was probably a Nazi scientist at one point?
Was he German or Austrian?
Well, he was Austrian. He did say he returned to the town he was born in, and that was that Austrian village.
I
wasn't Austria the first to go in World War II, though?
I think the excuse might be that he says, dictate my terms. It's a response to him saying dictate, but I did think it was tasteless.
And why is it that they desperately need Saltzman when they have a working Saltzman machine?
Well, indeed, why is it that? I mean, the pretext is that they haven't got a machine to reverse the process.
That seems like the process should be auto-reversing, doesn't it?
Well, yes, it seems like a reflexive process, as far as I can tell. If you can swap a mind from one body into another body, and at the same time swap the mind from your target body into your host body, then doing that again, just exactly in the same way, should take you back to where you started.
Does seem that way, yeah. Does
but
kind of seem.
Clearly,
for the purposes of what they said they were doing, which was spying, considering what we've seen of the village, really, do you think there wouldn't be people that they could just say, one-way journey?
Yeah, indeed. Is it really necessary?
Not for what they want. I mean, it's still a devastating weapon, and yet they imply that it's not useful yet until they get Saltzman and get the reversal process. And I think that was poor scripty writing too.
Yeah, it's already incredibly useful. Having the ability to put people back how they were afterwards is a kind of nicety that you might think was a bonus, but not really essential to the business of putting
high stakes buying.
An agent. Yeah, putting an agent in place who appears to be one person, but is in fact your own agent.
Well, let's see. What else? So Saltzman, he tricks them by hooking himself into the middle of this process, which no one should be suspicious of in any way, shape, or form. And did you notice that at the end of the process, it looked to all the world like it wasn't a spasm. It looked like he intentionally ripped the cables out as he collapsed. Yeah. Now, is that an attempt to kill the body of Saltzman now that he's transferred his mind out? And if he's already transferred his mind out, would he be capable of ripping the thing out, or would he be... I couldn't tell what to make of him pulling those cables out. Is he just trying to stop the process? But if his mind is already swapped, why would the Colonel even know to do that?
I have no idea. I mean, the process is ludicrous enough in itself. And from our kind of position now, looking back on it, perhaps it looks even more ludicrous than it might have done at the time. But the way in which it's kind of realised with these machines, gosh, the machines with their arcs and the coloured lights coming out of them, and the flashes and the shots of people's faces being coloured in blue and orange, and the sound effects with the lightning sound effect, and then when it's actually happening and you see it later on in that sequence at the end with Saltzman there, all the kind of gurning that goes on to indicate the process going on is really just quite painful.
It was weird that he showed, let me show you a test run of it at the beginning of the episode, and he turns the machine on and lets it arc around on two empty tables.
Because clearly what's important is not that it puts someone's mind into someone else's body, because we got no minds or bodies there.
Yeah,
what's important
it's the light
is that
show.
one of them's blue and one of them's orange, and they'll flash a lot and make lightning noises.
And I really expected them to switch places, the blue and the orange.
Well, that that would maybe have had some kind of narrative benefit. It might have been equally ludicrous, but yeah, and yes,
it's
clearly the reversal process, anyways, is as we suspected much the same. The only difference is you need a few more hi-fi cables and a kind of remote control volume knob.
Yes, it said something like EKG simulator on it, and that was under his finger, and I can't remember what the knob itself said. It didn't say volume, but it didn't say anything that made a lot of sense in the context of a brain transference machine. But that's the thing. As I went through the episode this time, and I'm taking notes. I'm really kind of going, yeah, wait a second. This is, and here I thought this was kind of cool. I like the episodes where he gets out of the village. It's not that I don't like the village. It's kind of that hopelessness of being out and realizing that there is no real escape from it.
Yeah.
But this one no longer works for me. I have ruined this episode for myself in watching it. And unfortunately, I have been tearing my house apart, and I cannot find my volume 2 of the Prisoner script books.
Oh no.
I have it. I definitely have it. I can even find the place on my bookshelf where it's missing from, but I cannot find the darn book. And that's in volume 2, so I didn't get a chance to read it. Luckily, Wikipedia actually has somebody summarize the differences based on what the script book said. So I did take a quick peek at those and kind of remember them from when I read the book a while back. And a couple things were different. One, apparently the Colonel was supposed to be his boss, as has been in previous visits to the outside. Not the guy he swapped brains with. So in other words, it's not the Colonel that he swaps brains with. It's some guy named Oscar. So instead of Sir Charles, we have the Colonel, and instead of the Colonel, we have Oscar. And the Colonel...
Oh, I see. Right, yes.
And the Colonel
is... The Colonel being the character in The Chimes of Big Ben?
Apparently. Yes. Apparently. Or a position of some not the fiancé's father. And that whole thing kind of plays out a little bit differently. But basically, when he wakes up, having forgotten the village, he hops in the car and barrels down to the office and resigns again. And it's when he gets there that he finds out that he's not him. So
that would be quite funny.
Yeah, that's it. I don't know. I don't know why they made that change to emphasize the fiancé more. He does get the stuff from the fiancé at her birthday party later on, but it's not. I don't think there's that earlier part where she comes and visits him and whatnot. So it sounds like they went through some revisions, and also there's a little more explanation where Saltzman says that the reversal process requires a medium in the middle to somehow negotiate this process. All that is hand-wavium. And also...
Well, it's implied anyway by the...
Saltzman body takes a lot longer to die. So number 6 apparently spends time with him in the hospital. while he's unconscious, like sitting by the bedside kind of thing, before Saltzman comes to. And so the Colonel's body, or in the original Oscar's body, has much more time to get away from the village. But the way it's shot in the as-aired version, he's practically hovering over the village at the point where number 2 finds out that that's really Saltzman. You'd think he could just, I don't know, get on the phone to the pilot and say, hey, bring him back.
Yep.
But he doesn't.
Yeah, it's interesting. Usually the changes that have been made in production have been changes that I felt have improved, whereas in this case, I wonder if it's because no McGowan there, and clearly he must have had a lot of input into some of these things that change as we see them on the screen.
There was something in one of them, in some article I read somewhere, that said that there was a possibility that there was some confusion with McGowan's instructions about the Colonel. And
right.
They took it wrong and decided that the Colonel would be the guy he swapped with or something. But there's also, I guess, there's also something in the plot, and this, I think you'll agree, is not better, about the Colonel, now the boss, the superior, the Colonel, in collusion with someone with regards to tracking down this Saltzman. So there's a stronger indication that the British are behind the village, which I think we've agreed in the past have been removed to keep the ambiguity up to advantage.
Yes, although I mean, this is the last point I've got about this one. Does seem to indicate that the village isn't part of the British intelligence, because in effect what you've got here is the village competing. There are a couple of references. First of all, with this machine, we could break any nation's security.
Mm-hmm.
That to me does suggest more of this idea of the village as being beyond any nation's security service, and this idea that you've talked about in the past of it being a kind of testing ground for a new world. And
you use the proper term, New World Order.
New World Order.
You got to get the conspiracies guys on there. That's their favorite term, New World Order, NWOs. Anyway.
So I mean, that's what it suggested to me. And the fact, I mean, there are various ways around explaining it. So the ambiguity could still be there. We don't know that, for example, these aren't two separate parts of British intelligence. So Sir Charles is after Saltzman and the village are after Saltzman for different departments. We don't know that the people in the village aren't working with. I mean, it's heavily implied they're not, and certainly the ending where the prisoner tries to get captured by agents of the village rather than agents of British intelligence suggests that they're not cooperating together. But you know, I did wonder when you see the kind of undertaker following around, you think, well, that's the agent of the village. But on the other hand, Sir Charles did say he was putting someone on, so is the agent of the village and the agent of Sir Charles the same person because they're working together? That kind of thing. But overall, it certainly, to me, felt like this gave quite a strong impression that the village is not connected with British intelligence.
I would agree.
And so it almost removed an ambiguity that I thought they had been quite careful to preserve in the past.
I would agree it felt that way. It definitely seems like they're competing sides. And, you know, if we talk about the village as being some sort of non-nation state, New World Order domination group, where do they get their money? I mean, those are some big expenses
Gates
that they
Foundation.
must have. Yeah. Yes. Okay. I'll buy that. It's Warren Buffett and Bill Gates running this whole thing.
Or whatever. So, you know, some contemporary benefactor who has
the Bilderberger Group or the what's the other one?
Yes, and clearly, you know, whatever the situation is, they are well
Rothschilds.
They're well connected in British intelligence, and presumably, if they aren't being run by the Russians, they're well connected with Soviet intelligence as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if it is this idea of New World Order, so clearly. It's not just a question of they have the financial backing, but they also have people in high places backing their goals.
Right. It remains a mystery. Perhaps as we go through this, we will find out who is behind this in the end. But for now, it's still completely a mystery. Oh. Anyway, I don't have anything else. I mean, like I said, it did kind of, as I was thinking through this episode, instead of just kind of watching it and enjoying driving through the foreign countries and getting the Lotus 7 out for a run. And, I have previously enjoyed it in the past, but as I went through it this time and I started thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, this one holds up poorer than many episodes in terms of, they're really asking us to buy an awful lot to make this work.
Yeah, I'm still going to say that it is probably my least favourite episode of all of them so far. While I did end up enjoying it after the kind of very, very shaky beginning, it's probably not better than any of the ones we've had to date.
I'm still not a fan of Dance of the Dead, but I guess I can put this down there with it, though. It's probably, well, no, something, the election one too, which doesn't come to mind, the title right at the moment. That one's down there too. Those three are pretty close to the bottom. Okay, so next time, what episode do we have to watch?
It will be It's Your Funeral.
It's Your Funeral, yes. First aired in December 8th, 1967. I happen to be looking at that in front of my screen. Sounds like a good day for a funeral, I suppose. Ooh, that's coming up close. I hope it's not. I hope it's not a good day for somebody's. Anyway, thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure, as always.
And listeners, I hope you'll join us again next time on Fusion Patrol. We hope you've enjoyed this retro episode of the Fusion Patrol podcast here at the Fusion Patrol Classics YouTube channel. For new episodes of our audio podcast every week and our entire back catalog, come visit us at fusionpatrol.com or subscribe in iTunes or most anywhere fine or even disreputable podcasts are found. You can also support our podcast at patreon.com/fusionpatrol.